authors, I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short non-fiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. Authors. I hope you're all keeping well in whatever part of the world you reside and listen to the podcast in. 80 episodes. I've hit 80 episodes and I just think that's absolutely incredible. So to celebrate, today's interview is with Brock Swinson, and he is an interviewer for Creative Screenwriting magazine, podcaster of the Creative Principles podcast, and author of Ink by the Barrel, Secrets from Prolific Writers. And we chat about Brock's books, his documentary, ghostwriting, creative practice, the Creative Principles podcast, interviewing skills, and Brock's celebrity interviews with the likes of Ethan Hawke for the Creative Screenwriting magazine. So in my author adventure this week, I have put the picture book back out on submission, just to another one or two publishers, and it takes a while actually to submit to traditional publishing houses. You might, some of them ask for different things, but even just to see what is open at the moment, and I actually started to think that maybe the book might be better represented from Scotland, which is where I grew up, hence the accent. And I started having a look at some publishing houses there, and I actually found a really, really amazing one. And I must be blind or something, because I spent time reading through their things and then writing this cool email. Then to see at the top of just to see where I was supposed to send the email, right at the top of their guidelines page, picture books they're not accepting submissions, or they're not open at the moment. I thought, for goodness sake. So, still putting the picture book out there. Nothing much else happening in the children's fictions worlds. And also not much happening on the non-fiction front either. You can still purchase my books, Author Fears and How to Overcome Them, if you are finding you are experiencing any doubts within yourself or your writing, confidence fears, external fears, other people, certain events, things like that, and many more fears. You can check out that book that just touches on some of those, and I've gone through a lot of the fears myself, so I kind of just share some insights and offer up some tips on maybe how to work through those, and or anybody who's starting a freelance writing business. Freelance Writing Quick Tips for Fast Success is my other book that shares 60 plus quick tips on aspects to place you in the pro position before you've met with your first client. These ebooks and audiobooks can be bought direct from my website, hybridauthor.com.au/books, and all print versions are available on Amazon and through Ingram Spark booksellers, whoever they may be. So with the podcast, you might have noticed that adverts have been switched on. If you're a regular listener, a few episodes back I sort of mentioned it. I just went on to listen and I got a QuickBooks advert, so an accounting software, not quite books, but still I think they're trying to be along the lines of whatever, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't very long, so we'll keep going and see how that goes. And in caravan plans, we are still in Darwin, which is amazing. We're having, obviously, the odd very humid day. It's still very hot, of course, because it's Darwin. We've just still plodding along here, enjoying it. We went off to Crocosaurus Cove or something in the city today and was, just absolutely blown away by the size of the crocodiles that they have in there. They're just massive and really scary, and they've got one in there called Bert, who actually was in the original Crocodile Dundee film, which was pretty cool. And we went sort of at the end when we kind of missed all the presentations. We saw some things and I got to pat like a baby crocodile as well, which was cute. Like, it's quite squishy, and it was funny because women had its mouth taped shut, and this one wasn't a tiny baby. It was probably, I wouldn't even say medium, small medium, but she's kind of sort of scratching its head, and you should have seen it. Its eyes were closing. It was like enjoying it. And we obviously got to see some snakes, and there was reptiles and the usual. So there's about 3 of these parks up here, but I think we've gone to that one, and that's fine. But there was these people that were in the cage of death, I think it's called, which is pretty much a glass cage being lowered into the crocodiles. One of the crocodiles dens, I suppose, and then they taunt it with food to get it to come closer to them and do all this stuff. And we were underneath in the, because it's like an aquarium, we were underneath in the viewing platform, and I got some really good pictures of this couple, which are videos, and I'm going to put some on social media. They'll probably be in one of them, but I sent them to the couple. They were really stoked. I think they're crazy, but the croc was just massive, and you can't help but just stare at it. It's just insane. And so we're here till first week in July. Then we're going to Kakadu National Park and making our way across to Cairns. I say Cairns, but I think because it's spelled Cairns, but everyone says it's Cairns, so who knows. Anyways, that's the plan. And then we've actually we're going to do a couple of weeks house sit in Mackay for, I guess it's a couple, and the dogs that we're looking after, it's 2 Dachshunds, and my daughter's Dachshund mad, so that's worked out quite well, and I'll let you know how that goes, but obviously that's a while away, so... If you love the podcast or any of the episodes has helped you further in your author adventure, you can now pay it forward by buying me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/thehybridauthor. Let's all support each other. Brock Swinson is an interviewer for Creative Screenwriting and the Creative Principles podcast. Recently, he's packed all of this knowledge into the book Ink by the Barrel, Secrets from Prolific Writers, broken up into 3 parts: time, voice, and process. The book contains advice on every single page to help novice writers become prolific. Welcome to the Hybrid Author podcast, Brock.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Can you tell our listeners how you got into the writing and authorship game?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of a wandering story. I started off going to school for screenplays. I lived in LA for a bit, doing some commercials and TV and that type of thing. I got the creative screenwriting job out there actually on Craigslist, which is kind of crazy. So I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And luckily, when I kind of pitched the idea of using some of the audio we had from our print interviews, they said you can have them. So that led to the podcast. And then I wanted to branch out to more than just screenwriter. So, because we were like turning down big actors and directors and some of that stuff. So I called it, so I write for Creative Screenwriting, but the podcast is Creative Principles. They are still somewhat connected. And then underneath all that, I've always been kind of doing marketing and different things too, to, pay the bills in addition to writing the books. And I'm trying to break in with screenplays and actually making my first documentary now too. So I'm a little all over the place, but really enjoying multiple facets of creativity.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny how things come full circle. And I think in the creative space, nothing's set in stone. And if you have an idea for one thing, it sort of snowballs into another. Like you said, it's all kind of, joining together. So the documentary sounds fantastic.
Yeah, so it's actually, I kind of see, I talk to a lot of screenwriters, and I kind of see screenwriting and stunt performers as like 2 of the overlooked aspects of movie making. So I kind of had this idea, and I've always been obsessed with Jackie Chan movies and some of that stuff. So the idea is like the history of stunts over time, over 100 years, starting with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and going all the way to Zoe Bell, who I think is from New Zealand, and then kind of up to today with Keanu Reeves, and of course all the actual stunt people behind that. So it's called Daredevil Society, and it's like 100 years of stunts in Hollywood is the big idea. It'll be like an 8-episode series next year.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds really interesting. I'm not into really all that, but I think that's, I like to learn about the history and stuff, especially Jackie Chan. He's just amazing, isn't he? Flies through the air, so.
Still going. Still got movies coming out, I think. So.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know how old he is now, but he doesn't seem to age. So, yeah. Well, I take it, obviously, all the things you've been doing, you've just put into Ink by the Barrel, Secrets from Prolific Writers, the book. Tell us about that, the premise behind that. How has this come about? And yeah, what's that about?
Yeah, it kind of started, during the pandemic is when I started writing the book. I spent a little time, I wrote it pretty quick and then did some rewrites. And I would say half of it's based on like my first 200 interviews or so from the podcast. So a lot of screenwriting advice. But really, I see it as kind of helping everyone. I mean, all advice about being prolific is good for all writers. I actually kind of used it to create a prolific challenge recently. We just had 1,000 people do my first like 30-day challenge. It was free. I kind of just taught everybody some lessons from the book, and it's based on screenplays or screenwriting, and then also like a lot of books that I've read from people like Ryan Holiday and people who write on writing and discipline and creating your environment to write more and kind of all those big ideas.
Wow, that's cool. So you've obviously done all these interviews and you've gained a lot of information. Have you quoted people in the book, or is this sort of your own take on it, the information you've received and you've implemented it and put your spin on it, or?
Yeah, I would say it's like mostly quotes. And what I mean by that is like I use actually Ryan Holiday's note card system. It's kind of lots of people use it, but I'll usually have a stack of like 500 note cards. I'll piece those together and then see kind of how I can create new ideas off of those. So I try to reference the actual quote as much as I can. And then it's actually easy from the writing process as far as nonfiction. You're just kind of filling the pieces in note to note, and that led me to kind of break. So ink by the barrel, the origin of that, there's an old expression: you never quarrel with a man who buys his ink by the barrel. And what that means is don't argue with the press. But the spin that I'm taking is buy your ink by the barrel, learn to be a prolific writer. I really believe that you get to the quality through the quantity. That doesn't mean you have to publish everything. So many writers tell me they have 5 terrible drafts of something in their drawer, and that's fine. That's something you kind of get through. But the book itself is based on all that. It's broken up into 3 parts: time, voice, and process. So you defend your time, you find your voice, and you develop your process. And that's kind of the almost like surefire route. And even within that, some ideas in the book may like contradict each other because there's so much advice in there, and not everyone going to write the same. And honestly, if you write your entire life, you're probably not going to write the same 5 years from now as you do now. So I really like to think a lot about writing up until you're 100 years old or more, and like how you can do it, and think about it that way.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I absolutely agree with those 3 sort of categories. It's something that I talk about myself because I find it's funny you say like 5 manuscripts in a drawer. I think I've got the same. I don't think they're crap though. But I can tell they've needed to sort of sit there and have, it's more the storylines in them. I can tell it's funny when you put something in a drawer and you leave it to have space, and then you can go back to it and you can kind of see blindly what's wrong with it. But you spend so much time with something like years, and I just don't have it in me to revisit these stories that I've spent so much time. I'm just like, oh shit, I can't go back there. But yeah, I've noticed with my process, I was very much sit down and just go with the flow and see what comes out. But now, doing it professionally and things, it's trying to find out what my process is so I can identify that and try and get a bit quicker, because I'm pretty slow writer. I'm not sure about yourself, but so voice is a big thing that, takes a while to kind of grasp as well when you're starting out.
Yeah, I think some of that. I mean, I think the quote is it's either like 5 bad screenplays or 7 bad screenplays. I think it's more about it maybe takes that long to learn the craft. But the first one I sent out got a little bit of attention, but I think it's more like kind of the combo is you're finding your voice. And if you look back to some films like Parasite that won the Oscar a few years ago, that was like his 7th or 8th film, and they're all about class warfare. He's obsessed with that theme. So I think like you could say he perfected it with that film. And I think a lot of writers write about the same idea and they just come at it from a dozen different ways.
Yeah, till it takes off, till one sticks.
Right, right.
Oh, well, that's amazing. So do you feel with all your interviews with the creative screenwriting and the podcast, do you feel that's helped your process and your voice and get to where you are now?
I think so. And part of it is like a sounding board for your own interest. So whenever I'm thinking about something odd, like, oh, I'm stuck in act two in this subgenre of horror movie or something like that, I can go find somebody and ask them something really super specific that might only apply to me. I mean, that's something that's only like, 5% of the podcast, but it's always beneficial though. I'm sure like talking to everyone. Most people are going to listen to the bigger names on my show, like Ethan Hawke or Aaron Sorkin or some of those guys. But if you want to break in like to whatever, and I'll try to talk to a lot of people like sports columnists and screenwriters, new authors, indie authors, chefs, musicians, whatever. If you're trying to break in, you should be listening to the person who just broke in, not the person who's been around so long they have no idea what marketing is anymore. I heard James Patterson say something like, "Don't worry about marketing," but today, like he has no concept of what that means. Everything is so drastically different. You should be listening to people who are like maybe just one or two levels ahead of you. And I find like some of that's the most beneficial across the board from who I talk to.
Absolutely, because the industry changes so much, doesn't it? So yeah, someone who's established has probably lost touch with that beginner's
Yeah.
I'm not even going to say luck, but yeah. How was interviewing Ethan Hawke? What was he like?
It was great. That one was like a big surprise. He did this show called The Lord Bird, and this was set up to interview. He was a co-creator, and I was interviewing his writing partner. At the last minute, they emailed me saying, "Hey, can Ethan join?" I was like, "Well, of course Ethan can join. That's
Hell yeah.
amazing." Yeah, so I got to talk to him about the whole. They adapted this book, and some of those where they're a little more famous. I get really into the nitty gritty of that project because they've been interviewed so many times. Whereas someone newer, I want to know more about their origin story and things people don't know. So those I do like to dig in really specifically to whatever that project is, where I try to be more evergreen with most of my content, just so it's kind of always valuable. And that's why it kind of works so well in book form for, long term. But yeah, I got to ask him some creative questions. And, he told me some things about, he did this TED talk about creativity a couple years before I think I spoke to him. And I don't know, he seemed very open-minded about the entire process. He seems very willing to change and adapt and move on to new things. I think that's what made his career last as long as it has.
Yeah, absolutely. He's in a lot of different things.
Yeah,
I think I just
forever. Yeah.
watched him in the, is it Black Phone? It's probably a bit old now, the
Oh,
horror
yeah.
movie,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Yeah. Yeah.
unrecognizable apart from obviously the name. And I was just like, oh yeah, it's not his usual roles,
Mhm.
but yeah, he was pretty good in that. So
Yeah.
sorry, what came first? Was it the creative screenwriting and then you started the Creative Principles podcast?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'd written for the magazine a couple of years and
Yeah.
I said like, "Hey, why don't we use this audio?" And they just kind of let me use it, which was amazing.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's been around maybe 5 years, but we're over 400 episodes. So I did some before that were not there. And then recently, with the pandemic and stuff, we've kind of moved to video. So I am doing some little teasers and stuff on Instagram and some of the social sites where I didn't really do that before. So some of that's kind of new.
Yeah, that's amazing. So were you like recording the interviews for the magazine and that's
Yeah.
what you were using for that? Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah.
now it's like Zoom and stuff like we're doing now.
Yeah.
Way back when, like when I was working a full-time sales job, and I was going to interview Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing. This was a huge interview for me. I'm like, a big fan of his work and everything else. Molly's Game was coming out, so this was 2017, and I still had this job, so I was doing these on my phone. I would go take my lunch break and interview someone like that in my car, and I would just kind of go through the questions and just kind of make it work. So a little bit's changed since then. I feel like that one you're just like going through the questions. Where now, like I really don't even prep. I kind of just like have a conversation with people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's probably showing how you've grown, I suppose, as an interviewer and things like that.
Yeah,
Same as myself, I like to send the questions as a sort of guide for things that I want to ask. And
yeah,
yeah, I do think of the audience with some sort of more beginnery things, but then there's other people I'll target and yeah, exactly that. You get to say what you want to say, which is good. But sometimes
yeah.
you can be I'd be a bit awestruck. I think if there was somebody famous, I'd just be like reading through the questions or something. So yeah. So how has publishing Ink by the Barrel been for you in terms of this kind of format to say writing a screenplay or something a lot different?
Yeah, I mean, I like to have a variety of projects going on, as you kind of got probably from the first question. I like to be making like I like to get up early in the morning and create something, whether that means I'm working on a video content or writing some like prose or writing a nonfiction or writing an article or writing a screenplay. I've written a couple screenplays by myself. Some I've written with a partner. Whenever I can, I just try to make some accountability there. I've also got an assistant. I've almost like, I mean, she does a ton of stuff for me now, but in the beginning, I almost hired her just to have some more accountability to say like,
Well,
I'm going to get this thing done by Friday, and it's a kind of cheap way to make yourself accountable. Yeah, I like to ask a lot of people that question too, and I think you just kind of get used to it. It is a little bit of a mental shift, but like one thing I talk about in the book is like the bigger shift almost than the formatting and stuff like that, which there is plenty of that there, is transitioning from the writer to the editor in your mind. I feel like when people get really stuck and have writer's block, they're trying to edit too hard when they should just be writing. You should kind of separate those two processes. And for all these things, I spent a lot of, like with the note cards, I spent a lot of time outlining. I've got a stack of note cards next to me about my next book, and I'm really just kind of throwing them in a pile right now. I'm not really even, I've got an idea like a North Star, but I'm just throwing them to the side. Promoting this book, so I'm doing some stuff around that. I'm co-authoring. I've done about 10 ghost books. I'm writing a ghost writing book with another author. So that gives me some, he sent me like, I don't know, 80 pages of notes from his life. And then we're also kind of connecting it to his business. So that's like a whole different ball game. And then I've also got like a board of all the stuff I'm doing with the movie. And then I've got the assistant is helping me with a lot of these things. So I really do always need something like physical in front of me. It's really hard for me to have everything digital. It's just like I can't really think that way. And I heard David Sedaris say, like, when you have a day of writing at your typewriter, even if nothing comes out, there's balls of paper on the floor at the end of the day. And I feel like
shows
so you go back
productivity.
and yeah, there's something there. Like as opposed to like, I don't know, you can close your laptop or whatever, but it just doesn't feel the same. So I like to kind of bounce between things, work for other people as often as I can, just to kind of have things going. But I ended up self-publishing this book. I didn't shop this one around actually. I shopped a few around. And then as a ghostwriter, I've written probably 10 books. One of them just hit number 2 on the Wall Street Journal list, but it's almost like more about who you're with and all that kind of stuff. And I got to like multiple meetings, like just pitching by myself and name dropping celebrities and everything else, but I don't have an audience. I'm kind of starting to build that now. But then as a ghostwriter, I've been in meetings where the person I'm writing for has 100,000 people on Instagram. I can tell that the people buying the book don't really even care what the book is about. And that's kind of like a little bit heartbreaking. And the ironic thing is, if you want to be an author, if you create a list of 100,000 people, you don't need traditional publishing anymore. So I'm kind of just navigating the waters. And I worked at ClickFunnels for a while. So I've written copy for people like Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone. And I've seen how they navigate these things, and Russell Brunson. So I'm doing a lot of those similar techniques with some giving away a lot of free stuff. So at brockswinson.com, you can get this PDF for free. You can get the audiobook for free. I'm doing the Prolific Challenge a couple times this year. That's all for free. And then later, I'll eventually kind of have some type of mentorship or something like that people who really want to get down to it, or, maybe they want to figure out like how to work on Upwork or something like that I can show them, just because I've done a little bit of everything over the years.
Sounds like all the things you're saying. I'm just like, woo! My gosh, you must be not exhausted. Obviously, you've got an assistant as well, but I mean, how do you fit all that into what is your week like? Do you just prioritize, and it's like, this is going to be ahead of this? And I mean, where does the podcast come into that as well? Is that a weekly thing, or?
Yeah, I almost think like I'm trying to navigate that a little bit better now and kind of let my assistant take over more. So I like to, like, for example, we're honestly just now getting on Twitter, right? So I'll like to figure things out, which means like I'll give myself maybe 2 weeks to do whatever I want to do. And I do video editing, stuff like that too. So I'll make the reels, I'll write the quotes, I'll send it to a website or whatever, set up that foundation, and then I'll pass that off to her. And I'm trying to delegate more and more often as I can. Some of these people, like I'll be working with a partner or something, especially with screenwriting. So it's just like balancing your week. I used to try so hard to like, I'm going to do a little bit of everything every day, and I'll break it up into hour intervals or whatever. But also in the book, like the maker and the manager schedule, that just doesn't work. If you're going to be a maker, I almost need to like, kind of what I've figured out recently is like, I can really only get about 3 things done. And I print out what I plan to get done for that month on a piece of paper, and I literally keep it in my pocket. That's what I'm doing now. and I've got a certain number of open spots in addition to that. And I kind of know that like this is it. So if you write it down, you're promising yourself you're going to get it done. And meanwhile, you're thinking like, okay, some of these things have to pay the bills, some are for fun, some are going to happen later. And then finding that balance, everything works out. But I change the process all the time. So if you talk to me in 6 months, it'll probably be different. But whatever seems to work, I'm constantly like tweaking and adjusting it. And it really does like, invigorate me to do a lot of different things though.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've just finished up at a job, it was said technical script writing, but it was more like e-learning modules and things.
Yeah.
And that was like doing about 10, 15 projects at once. So I'm used to sort of shifting all over the place. And then I've gone back to being like, no, I just need to focus on one thing at a time. And then it's like, no, you get pulled in all different directions because you've got your hand in so many different things. And I've figured out that I'm someone who gets bored really easily as well. So, and to write a book takes a long time. Screenplays, I've only ever written, say, one or something like that, but I think maybe that might be a little bit quicker, but I'm not sure for the process as well. But ghostwriting, hats off to you. I feel, I don't know, is it hard for you knowing that you've wrote the book of someone so famous, I guess, and then it feels like they're reaping the benefits, I suppose, of your work, but I guess if it's their story, maybe you wouldn't feel that way, but I don't know how I'd go with that.
Yeah, it's funny. And like, you pretty much don't mention it. There's NDAs and stuff like that. Sometimes I might use a little sample to apply for another job or something like that with the understanding of that. But it doesn't really bother me. I've probably written like 8 or 10 that are like business books. And it's nice to get a text from the person or something, say, hey, we just hit this number or whatever it is. But really I don't know. It's like, I see it as an extension of the podcast a bit. Like I've gotten so used to interviewing people and everyone works differently. Like the last person I worked with, he puts a lot of content out. So I was just kind of digging through social media to put the book together, where some people want to be very involved. They might even kind of co-write some of it. And I kind of let them do that. It's really up to the person. The person I'm talking to now, so he was a food importer in one of the big areas in America, but he dealt with like hundreds of super famous chefs and that type of thing. He has an interesting take, but it's more of his personal take. Is he kind of just sees it as like egotistical a little bit to be the author, and if he's going to hire somebody, he likes the idea. So it would be something like where it's his name with Brock Swinson. That's kind of what we're talking about. And I'm almost like with ghostwriting, I'm trying to get where everything lines up with like a life purpose and do more things in that direction. And, I started doing books for like $2,500 total, and they're pretty short. And then you can get up to like $10,000 and beyond, but it takes a lot of time. And it's like, at the same time, you can make more money, like building a landing page for somebody or something like that. So yeah, it's just really like finding that balance, like getting a few things that pay the bills. And then, if you can keep it in your mind the whole time that like, I really need to be going for things that interest me most, you're usually better off. Like the Craigslist thing with the magazine was crazy. Years after that, I was writing articles for like about the TV show The Walking Dead for like $10 a piece. It was like nothing. This guy built a massive website. We had 1 million people reading these things. I started doing a Facebook show for him that like 60,000 people watched it. And then like sometime after that, he kind of referred me to the job I got, which led to like meeting Russell Brunson. And I got to learn marketing from John Parks, who's like the VP of marketing at ClickFunnels. So I think like whenever I really just explore curiosities, it's almost like taking a college course or something like that, except you're getting paid to do it. So it's almost always worth it. It's just like balancing all those things of like what's worth it and what's going to pay your bills and what do you really love to do. And then you kind of want to spiral upward and like keep doing more things you love to do. That's kind of the main goal.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, that's all sounds absolutely amazing. I do wonder about ghostwriting as well. I suppose, like, I take it's most common to just take like a chunk of money for the work up front. That's it. There's no royalties and things involved, is there?
Not royalties, yeah. It'd be like, or like milestones. You'd have it, probably breaking it up or something, or you get paid one big amount at the end. Yeah. The only two, so I've written 2 fiction books. One of them I kind of liked. It was a Western. That was when I was like, oh, I wish this was me. And they picked like a weird pen name. It was just some like ebook thing. And then this other one, this company asked me to write a book similar to like 50 Shades of Grey. So it's kind of like, for that audience. And that one, they were like, we really want to use your name. And I was like, okay. But it wasn't really like, I didn't really want come to. So there's like a book in Canada that I've written that's like a 50 Shades of Grey book or something. But
I'll have to look that one up. But I just mean like, so you're obviously paid for the work, but on the sales and things of these books, nope, that doesn't work out that way.
No, like this one I'm writing now where I'm on the cover, it's probably something I could negotiate. I kind of pitched him. So like this guy's got he's pretty well known, but he's not big on social media, but he's like, there's been New York Times articles about him and different things like that. So I kind of pitched in a way where it's like, you can pay me 3/4 of the amount we agree upon to finish the book. And I won't take the last quarter unless I can help you actually get the book published. And for me, it's more like this is a route to getting published in addition to all the other things. So I'm just trying a multitude of ways to get in. The same with screenwriting. I'm making this documentary, just trying to break in as a writer director. But I'm also like talking to the screenwriting coach that I'm writing 2 TV shows that are kind of in the same genre, and we're trying to sell those at the same time. So like whenever you can hit a multitude of angles and really just like I talk early in the book about inevitable success. It's the kind of thing like if you need to lose weight, there's probably 3 or 4 things you can do. Like it's actually not as hard as you think. It's just like, can you be consistent and do it for the long haul? Basically, everything's the same way.
That's it. No, that makes absolute sense. Well, you are an absolute wealth of knowledge, Brock, on many different subjects. But do you have any tips for authors and writers who want to succeed in the booking or the film industries? Any hot tips you'd be like, oh, I wish I'd known that then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like consistency, just like sticking with it. For those people that just never finished anything, so the people who signed up for that challenge, like 1,000 people joined. I mentored about 12 of them during the challenge, and I was really surprised because it's like kind of talking to myself like 10 years ago. It's like stuff I've forgotten that it was a problem. It's like I'll talk to somebody and they're like, I want to be this type of author, and I'm like, great. Who do you read in that genre? And they're like, well, I don't read anyone. I'm like, well, that's going to be an issue. So do all the obvious things that you should be doing. If you can't develop a habit, what I would say is like, don't try to go with words first, go by like a time. So like spend 10 minutes at your desk every morning at the same time or every night, whenever it makes sense for you. Do it every single day, do it for 30 days and just see how much it changes you. And there's a quote from Neil Gaiman that I probably said 10 times during that challenge is like, you can sit in your desk and you can write or you can do nothing, but you can't do anything else. So that really just eliminates everything else. And eventually you're going to write something and it might be terrible, but then that's kind of moving to like shifting from the writer to the editor. But really just like the consistency is what leads to the better version of you as a writer. And that's really all that it is.
Yeah, that's amazing advice there. Tell us about the challenge a bit more. How many times are you running it more towards, are you still going to be running it the rest of the year?
Yeah, we'll probably do it again in like September or something like that. We've ran it twice. We've had a couple thousand people sign up for it. So anyone who goes to my website, brockswinson.com, get the book for free, and then you'll be on the email list. And I'll let you know kind of what's next. So the next thing I'm doing is actually a Upwork challenge. And it's really for those people who just want to break in. So the first thing I'm doing is like a free thing. It's like, I'll show you how to get your first client in 5 days guaranteed. And that's will be the first thing I'm doing. And that's just a combination of like how to apply and bypass all the gatekeepers and imaginary gatekeepers in your mind and some of that stuff. But anyone on that newsletter list will kind of know what's next. And then once we run that challenge again, I'll let them know. We're also doing some stuff like how to write a nonfiction book in 30 days, how to write a movie in 30 days. A lot of things are just around like finishing the first draft. I think that's so important. And I'm trying to kind of all that's under the umbrella of just like being prolific.
That all sounds amazing. And so at the moment you said you can get like the audiobook for Ink by the Barrel free, is that right, from your website? And the ebook or just the audio?
Yeah. The PDF and the audiobooks all for free. I like the idea of that. So you can listen to the audiobook. And then if you like, what did he say about Jerry Seinfeld? You can just go do the search and kind of reread that and use it as like a reference book. And it's really meant that there are so many quotes and advice that just like, I call it borrowed authority. It's just like me scouring interviews and reading hundreds of books and everything else. So it's really meant to be like every page has some value on it. So I really want people to just kind of like take it in, and then I'll write another book probably in about a year from now. That's kind of the goal.
Amazing. So will this remain free for like until you've got your next book out, or just the end of the year, or is there a cap on that, or until you've built up enough audience? Or
Possibly forever, but our big goal is to give away 100,000 copies in 2023. That's really what we're shooting for. So I've been doing some different podcasts and some different promotions, and yeah, we're just trying to put it out there as much as we can. And anyone listening, go download it, tell your friends. It's all on brockswinson.com.
Amazing. And can you share with us about the Creative Principles podcast as well? Where can people find that? And yeah.
Yeah, it should be anywhere you find your podcast, on SoundCloud and Apple and Spotify. It's just called Creative Principles. Principles is PLES at the end. I also write for Creative Screenwriting magazine. You can go find that. If you kind of Google my name, all these things should pop up. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, just at Brock Swinson. I'm starting to kind of post some reels there, like some of my recent conversations with like Peter Gould, who wrote Better Call Saul, or Diedrich Bader, who's on Lucky Hank, or so a lot of actors, and Thomas Jane, who's in The Punisher, and lots of stuff. So lots of little teasers on there as well.
Yeah, my husband is addicted to his podcast at the moment, The Punisher's podcast. I think, I'm not sure what it is, but when we've been traveling around, he's only started getting into podcast, but he's like, I love this podcast. So oh yeah, I'll have to name drop. Well, that is, honestly, thank you so much for all you've shared today, Brock, all your expertise. And I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing, and I'm sure our listeners will rush out and onto your website where everything is, and check out the podcast and everything that you're doing, and your 50 Shades of Grey book as well.
Thanks again. I appreciate it.
So there you have it, folks. The smooth sound advice there from Brock Swinson. Isn't he fabulous? So get on his challenge and go get his audiobooks, and they're for free at the moment. You get some free, amazing advice. Prolific writing. Next time on the Hybrid Author podcast, we have the one, the only Shanae Maripodi, and she's sharing the do's and don'ts of a debut author. I wish you well in your author adventure this next week. That's it from me. It's bye for now.
That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.